Guys, welcome to the Channel of Love study group. We're going to get on with reading our book, How to Raise Your Own Salary by Napoleon Hill. My eyesight has gone all blurry. Okay, perfect. Let's have a look. We're on chapter 8. So we've completed now Cultivate Creative Vision, chapter 7. Chapter 8. Okay, let's just read this little quote first. Where we ended off last time. Edison failed 10,000 times before he perfected the incandescent electric lamp. The average man would have quit after the first failure, which explains why there are so many average men and but one Edison. Okay, chapter 8, exercise self-discipline. Perhaps there is no other word in the English language which describes the major requirement for individual achievement as does the subject of self-discipline. This entire philosophy serves in the main to enable one to develop control over himself, this being the greatest of all the essentials of success. In this chapter will be found a consolidation of the previous 7 principles. In this chapter, the way will be prepared for one to apply the 7 principles previously described. You have already observed how the principles of this philosophy blend with one another and are related, as are the links of a chain, in such a manner that not one of the principles could be omitted without weakening the philosophy. Through self-discipline, the power available through each of the principles of this philosophy becomes condensed and ready for application in the practical affairs of daily life. The effect of this condensation may be clearly described by comparing it with a group of electric batteries, each of the 17 principles of the philosophy representing a separate battery. By connecting the batteries properly, one has available the sum total of the power each individual battery contains. Self-discipline is the master battery through which the power of all 17 of the principles may be applied. It is necessary for the student of this philosophy to catch the full significance of the relationship between self-discipline and the other principles of the philosophy in order that he may avail himself of the entire power that is available through the 17 principles, for the reason that self-discipline represents the bottleneck through which that power must pass. Mr. Carnegie has taken great pains to emphasize the necessity of self-discipline because he learned from his own experience in dealing with thousands of men that no one may hope to achieve noteworthy success without gaining control over himself. He learned from his own experience and from his observation of other people that when a man once takes possession of his own mind and begins to rely upon it, he has achieved a victory of the highest order, and one that places him within easy grasp of whatever he sets his heart and head upon. Self-discipline, then, may be defined as the act of taking possession of one's own mind. Self-discipline is something one cannot acquire as one learns the multiplication table, but it can be acquired through persistence by following the procedure outlined in this chapter. The price of self-discipline, therefore, is eternal vigilance and continuous effort in carrying out these instructions. In no other way can it be acquired, and it has no other bargaining price. One gets self-discipline through his own efforts, or he does not acquire it at all. Without self-discipline, an individual may be likened to a dry leaf that is blown hither and yon by the stray winds of circumstance, with not the slightest chance of coming within sight of anything that even remotely resembles personal success. Excuse me. Men who take possession of their own minds and use them may set their own price tag on themselves and make life pay what they ask. Those who fail to do so must take whatever life tosses out to them, and we need offer no evidence that this always is barely more than the mere necessities of life. In the private study of Andrew Carnegie, you will now be privileged to sit while he instructs his first students on the subject of self-discipline. Hill. Mr. Carnegie, you have designated self-discipline as the 8th principle of individual achievement. Will you begin this interview by describing the part that self-discipline plays in personal achievement and indicate how this principle can be developed and applied in the practical affairs of daily life? Carnegie. Let us begin by calling attention to some of the uses of self-discipline. After that, we will discuss the methods by which this important principle may become the possession of anyone who is willing to pay the price. Self-discipline begins with the mastery of one's thoughts. Without control over thoughts, there can be no control over deeds. Let us say, therefore, that self-discipline inspires one to think first and act afterward. The usual procedure is just the reverse. Most people act first and think afterward, if and when they think at all. Self-discipline gives one complete control over the 14 major emotions, enabling one to eliminate or subjugate the 7 negative emotions and exercise the 7 positive emotions in whatever manner desired. Okay, let me just reread that part, guys. Self-discipline gives one complete control over the 14 major emotions, enabling one to eliminate or subjugate the 7 negative emotions and exercise the 7 positive emotions in whatever manner desired. The effect of this control becomes obvious when one recognises that emotion rules the lives of most people and largely rules the world. Although we have described the 14 major emotions in a previous interview, we are compelled to mention them again, for the reason that self-discipline must begin, if it begins at all, with a complete mastery of these emotions. The 7 positive emotions. Number 1, love. Number 2, sex. Number 3, hope. Number 4, faith. Number 5, enthusiasm. Number 6, loyalty. And number 7, desire. The 7 negative emotions. Number 1, fear. See 7 basic fears. Number 2, jealousy. Number 3, hatred. And in brackets it says prolonged. Number 4, revenge. Number 5, greed. Number 6, anger. In brackets temporary. Number 7, superstition. All these emotions are states of mind, subject to control and direction. The 7 negative emotions obviously are deadly if they are not mastered. The 7 positive emotions may also be just as destructive as the negative emotions if they are not organised, mastered and guided under complete control. In these 14 emotions is the mental dynamite, which may lift one to great heights of achievement or dash one to the lowest depths of failure, and no amount of education, experience, intelligence or good intentions can alter or modify this possibility. Hill. It seems obvious that lack of control of the 7 negative emotions may lead one to sure defeat, but it is not clear as to how one may use the 7 positive emotions for the achievement of desirable ends. Carnegie. I will show you exactly how the positive emotions can be transmuted into a driving power that can be used in the attainment of any purpose. I can best do this by describing the manner in which one man made effective use of his emotions. That man is Charlie Schwab, and my analysis of his use of emotions is based upon close association with him over a long period of years. Shortly after he began work with me, he made up his mind to become an indispensable part of my business family, thereby directing to a definite end the emotion of desire. In carrying out his desire, he applied all the principles of achievement mentioned in the previous interviews. A. Definiteness of purpose. B. The mastermind. C. Attractive personality. D. Applied faith. E. Going the extra mile. F. Organised endeavour. G. Creative vision. And H. Self-discipline. Through the principle of self-discipline, Charlie Schwab organised the other 7 principles and brought them under his control. Back of this self-control, he placed all of his emotional feeling and expressed it through his loyalty to his associates, enthusiasm over his work, hope of successful achievement in connection with his work, faith in his ability to achieve, and back of all these emotions, he was driven by the emotion of love for his wife, whom he was seeking to please by his achievements. The motive which inspired him to organise and use his emotion for the attainment of a definite end was the twofold motion of love and desire for financial gain, these two being at the head of the list of the 9 basic motives. Of course, Mr. Schwab made use of all of the other principles of individual achievement, which we have not yet mentioned, before he finally attained his goal, and he continued to use all the principles of this philosophy after attaining it, but the 8 principles we have covered were the ones he used at the outset. Hill: I think I understand what you mean, Mr. Carnegie. Will you check me while I describe my understanding of Mr. Schwab's rise to power? First, he decided what he wanted, thus putting into use the principle of definiteness of purpose. He adopted a plan for getting what he wanted and, judging by what you have said of him, he began carrying out his plan by going the extra mile, thereby making use of the principle of organised endeavour. By working in harmony with you and his other associates, he made use of the mastermind principle. By his adoption of such a high aim, he showed that he understood and used the principle of creative vision and demonstrated also his understanding and application of the principle of applied faith. By the pleasing, harmonious manner in which he related himself to you and his other associates, he indicated his understanding and use of the principle of attractiveness of personality. By the intelligent manner in which he used all these principles, and by sticking persistently to his undertaking until he completed it, he demonstrated his understanding and use of self-discipline, through which he subordinated all his desires to the one sole purpose of making himself as indispensable part of your organisation. Back of all this endeavour were the 2 motives of love for his wife and his desire for financial achievement, through which he harnessed and used all his positive emotions for the attainment of a definite purpose. Now, does that about state the case? Carnegie: that was the procedure followed, and you will notice that his chances of success would have been lessened had he failed to use any of the principles mentioned. It was through a carefully planned application of all these principles that he attained success. The application required self-discipline of the highest order. If he had squandered any of his emotional power in any other direction whatsoever, the results might have been different. In fact, of which I am reminded by the experience of another man who started out to attain the same relationship in my organisation that Charlie Schwab successfully attained. This man had everything that Charlie had, as far as ability was concerned. In addition to this, he had a much better education, having graduated from one of the best-known colleges where he specialised in industrial chemistry. He made just as effective use of every one of the principles mentioned as Charlie did, with one lone exception, and that was the motive by which he was inspired. His motive was a desire for financial gain, not as a means of expressing love for his wife, but to feed his own vanity. He had a love for power, not as an expression of his pride of achievement, but as a means of lauding his authority over other people. Despite this weakness, he climbed steadily until he became an official member of my mastermind group. Then he took a tumble, through which he dashed his hopes and his opportunity to pieces by his arrogance and vanity. He was reduced in rank out of necessity for us to maintain harmony in our mastermind group, and wound up finally at the bottom of the ladder, right where he started. His demotion inflicted a wound to his vanity from which he never recovered. Woo! Right. She moved over. Hill, what was the man's greatest weakness, Mr. Carnegie? Carnegie, I can answer that in 3 words. Lack of self-discipline. If he had gained mastery over his feelings, he could have succeeded with much less effort than Charlie Swab put into this job, because he had more education and possessed every other attribute of success that Swab possessed. He failed to control and direct his positive emotions. When he saw himself slipping, he began to give way to many of the negative emotions, particularly to jealousy, fear, and hatred. He was jealous of those who had succeeded. He hated them because they had excelled him, and he feared everyone, particularly himself. No man is strong enough to succeed with such an array of enemies as this working against him. Hill, I judge from what you have said that personal power is something which has to be used with discretion, or it may turn out to be a curse instead of a blessing. Carnegie, I have always made it a part of my business philosophy to caution my associates against the dangers of indiscreet use of personal power, and especially those, through promotions, have been recently come into my possession of increased power. Newly acquired power is something like newly acquired riches. It needs watching closely, lest a man become the victim of his own power. Here is where self-discipline gives a good account of itself. If a man has his own mind under complete control, he makes it serve him in a manner that does not antagonise other people. Hill, if I understand you, Mr. Carnegie, self-discipline calls for a complete mastery of the 7 negative emotions and a controlled guidance of the 7 positive emotions. In other words, a man must stand with his foot on the necks of the 7 negative emotions while he organises and directs, to a definite end, the 7 positive emotions. Is that the idea? Carnegie, yes, but self-discipline calls for mastery over traits of character other than the emotions. It calls for a strict budgeting and use of time. It calls for mastery of the inborn trait of procrastination. If a man aims for a high station in life, he has no time to spend on non-essential activities other than those he needs for recreation, and these are not exactly non-essential. Hill, will you name the traits of character which most often stand in the way of self-discipline? Carnegie, the list is rather long, and it will be covered in detail in the coming interview on learning from defeat. However, let us assume for the present that the major enemies of self-discipline are the 7 negative emotions. These are the obstacles to which a man must give attention first if he wishes to be sure of success. Self-discipline begins with the formation of constructive habits, especially the habits connected with food, drink, sex, and the use of one's so-called spare time. Generally speaking, when a man gets these habits under control, they help to regulate all these other habits, and you will observe that the mastery of the 8 principles of this philosophy we have mentioned provides a man with everything he needs to shape his habits so they serve him constructively. Consider the example what definiteness of purpose does to fix one's habits. When one begins to apply the principle of going the extra mile, he makes a long-term he makes a long step forward in the establishment of constructive habits. For in doing more than he is paid for, he is forced to budget his time to better advantage. Consider then what happens when a man becomes obsessed with a strong motive which he begins to express through the principle of organised endeavour in conjunction with the principle of creative vision. By the time he gets control of these principles, he has already gone a long distance toward the adoption of habits which, of themselves, constitute the finest sort of self-discipline. Do you see how this works? Hill: yes, I do. And I can see too that everything a man does centres around the major motive behind his definite major purpose. Motive really is the starting point of all achievement, is it not? Carnegie: that is right. But you should take care to say that one's motive must be obsessional. That is, it must be so strong that it impels a man to subordinate all his thoughts and efforts to its attainment. Too often people become confused between motive and a mere wish. Wishing will not bring success. If it did, everyone would be successful because all people have wishes. They wish for everything from the earth to the moon, but wishes and daydreams amount to nothing until they are fanned into a hot flame of desire based upon a definite motive, and this must become the dominating influence of one's mind. It must be given obsessional proportions sufficient to cause action. Even a motive without organised endeavour behind it will be of no benefit, so I repeat what I have already suggested, that one should copy the 9 basic motives and place them in a prominent place where they can be seen daily. These motives, which serve as a driving force behind one's chosen major purpose, should be underscored and emphasised so they will not be overlooked. They should be included also in the written description of one's definite major purpose, as suggested in a previous interview. A definite purpose without an obsessional motive back of it is as useless as a locomotive without any steam in the boiler. Motive is the thing that gives power and action and persistence to one's plans. Hill: that reminds me to ask you, Mr. Carnegie, what is your motive in spending all this time coaching me to organise the philosophy of American achievement? You have more of the material riches than you need. You have recognition as the leading industrialist of the world. Your life has been a stupendous success, and as far as I can see, there is nothing you desire which you do not already possess. Carnegie: that is where you are wrong. I do not have everything I wish. It is true I have more material riches than I need, as is evidenced by the fact I am giving my money away as rapidly as I can do so safely. But there is something I want more than all else, and it is an obsessional desire to provide the people of America with a safe and dependable philosophy by which they may acquire riches in their highest form, riches which will enable people to relate themselves to one another so that they may find peace of mind and happiness and joy in the responsibilities of life. My obsessional desire grew out of my experiences with people, through which I have learned of the great need for such a philosophy. It is the exception rather than the rule when I find a man who is trying to benefit himself without damaging others. On every hand I see people unwisely trying to get something for nothing, although I know well enough that all they will get is grief and disappointment. My motive in helping to organise a dependable philosophy of individual achievement is the same as that which prompts some men to erect great monuments of stone to mark the spots where their earthly remains will finally rest. Monuments of stone crumble with time and go back to dust, but there is a type of monument which can be made eternal, and it will last as long as civilization itself. It is the monument a man may build in the hearts of his fellow men through some form of constructive service which benefits mankind as a whole. It is such a monument that I hope to build through your cooperation, and may I suggest that in helping me to build it, you may let it serve also as your own monument. Hill, I see your point, Mr. Carnegie. Was that your motive at the outset of your career? Carnegie, no, it was not. In the beginning, I was motivated by a desire for self-expression and the desire for financial influence with which to make that expression widespread in its influence. But in carrying out my original motive, I happily hit upon a bigger and nobler motive, the motive of making men instead of making money. I caught the vision of that greater motive as the result of my having discovered, in the process of making money, the great need for better men. If civilization is to evolve to still higher standards of living, or hold even the gains it has made, men must be taught higher standards of human relationship than those which now prevail. And above all, they must learn that there are riches vastly greater than any represented by material things. The need for this wider vision is sufficient to challenge even the greatest of men. It was this challenge to which I responded when my obsessional motive became that of giving the people a sound philosophy of individual achievement. Hill, from all you have said, I deduce that self-discipline is largely a matter of the adoption of constructive habits. Carnegie, that is precisely the idea. That which a man is, that which he accomplishes, both his failures and his successes, are the results of his habits. Fortunately, habits are self-formed. They are under the control of the individual. The most important of these are the habits of thought. A man comes finally to resemble, in his deeds, the nature of his thought habits. When he gains control over his thought habits, he has gone a long way towards the attainment of self-discipline. Definite motives are the beginning of thought habits. It is not difficult for a man to keep his mind on the thing that serves as his greatest motive, especially if the motive becomes obsessional. Self-discipline without definiteness of motive is impossible. Moreover, it would be without value. I have seen fakirs in India who had such perfect self-discipline that they could sit all day long on the sharp points of nails driven through a board, but their discipline was useless because there was no constructive motive back of it. Hill, then self-discipline, in the sense that it is designated as one of the 17 principles of individual achievement, has reference to complete mastery of both one's thought habits and one's physical habits. Carnegie, self-discipline means exactly what the word implies, complete discipline over self. Now I must call your attention to the fact that self-discipline calls for a balancing of the emotions of the heart and the reasoning faculty of the mind, of the head. Let's reread. Now I must call your attention to the fact that self-discipline calls for a balancing of the emotions of the heart and the reasoning faculty of the head. That is, one must learn to respond to both his reason and his feelings according to the nature of each circumstance calling for his decisions. Sometimes it will be necessary for him to set aside his emotions entirely and allow his head to rule. In matters of love and sex, this ability becomes highly important. I have known men who had so little control over their love emotions that they were as so much putty. I have known men who have had so little control over their love emotions that they were as so much putty in the hands of a woman. Such men, needless to say, never accomplish very much that benefits them. On the other hand, I have seen men who were so cold and unemotional that they were under the control of their heads entirely. They too missed the better things of life. Hill, would it not be safer if a man controlled his life with his reasoning faculty, leaving the emotions out of his decisions and plans? Carnegie, that would be very unwise, even if it were possible, for the reason that the emotions provide the driving power, the action force, which enables a man to put his head decisions into operation. The remedy is control and discipline of the emotions, not elimination. Moreover, it is very difficult to eliminate the great emotional nature of man, if in fact it is not impossible. The emotions of man are something like a river, in that their power can be dammed up and released in whatever proportions and whatever direction one desires, but they cannot be eliminated. Through self-discipline, a man can organise all his emotions and release them in a highly concentrated form as a means of attaining the object of his plans and purpose. The two most powerful emotions are love and sex. These emotions are inborn, the handiwork of nature, the instruments through which the Creator provided for both the perpetuation of the human race and for social integration, by which civilization evolves from a lower to a higher order of human relationship. One would hardly wish to destroy so great a gift as the emotions, even if this were possible, for the reason that they represent man's greatest power. If you destroy hope and faith, what would you have left that would be of use to man? If you remove enthusiasm, loyalty, and the desire for achievement, you would still have left the faculty of reason, the head power. But what good would it be? There would be nothing left for the head to direct. Now let me call your attention to the astounding truth. The emotions of hope, faith, enthusiasm, loyalty and desire are nothing but specialised applications of the inborn emotions of love and sex diverted or transmuted into different purposes. As a matter of fact, every human emotion outside of love and sex has its roots in these two natural inborn traits of man. If these two natural emotions were destroyed in a man, he would become as docile as an animal that has been desexed. He would have his reasoning faculty left, but what could he do with it? Hill, self-discipline then is the tool with which a man may harness and direct his inborn emotions in whatever direction he chooses. Carnegie, that is correct. And now I wish to call your attention to another astounding truth. Creative vision is the result of self-discipline through which the emotions of love and sex are transmuted into some specialised plan or purpose. There has never yet been born a great leader in any form of human endeavour who did not attain his leadership by mastery and direction of these two great inborn emotions. The great artists, musicians, writers, speakers, lawyers, doctors, architects, inventors, scientists, industrialists, salesmen, and the outstanding men and women in all walks of life attain their leadership by harnessing and directing their natural emotions of love and sex as a driving force behind their endeavours. In most instances, the diversion of these emotions into specialised endeavour is done unconsciously as the result of a burning desire for achievement. In some instances, the transmutation is deliberate. Hill, then it is no disgrace for one to be born with great capacity for the emotions of love and sex. Carnegie, no. The disgrace comes from the abuse of these natural gifts of the Creator. The abuse is the result of ignorance, the lack of training as to the nature and potentialities of these great emotions. To say that the medium by which the Creator perpetuates the species is a disgrace is the same as saying that man himself is a disgrace, for there is but little left in man, except about $16 worth of chemical matter, if you remove from him the creative power of emotion. Hill, I get the impression that the most important application of self-discipline is that through which one takes possession of his sex emotion and transforms it into whatever form of endeavour he desires. Is that true? Carnegie. Yes, and I may add that when a man once acquires discipline over his sex emotion, he will find it easy to discipline himself in all other directions, and this for the reason that the emotion of sex reflects itself, either consciously or unconsciously, in practically everything a man does. Failure to gain control over the emotions of love and sex generally means failure to gain control over other traits. Take the case of Charles Dickens, for example. Early in life, he met with a great disappointment in love. Instead of allowing his unrequited love emotions to destroy him, he transmuted that driving force into a novel called David Copperfield, which brought him fame and fortune and led him into the creation of other literary works, which made him a master in this field. Abraham Lincoln was a mediocre lawyer who had failed dismally at everything he had undertaken until the deep wells of his emotion were opened wide by his great sorrow over the death of Anne Rutledge, the only woman he ever truly loved. He converted his sorrow into a public service that made him one of America's immortals. It is regrettable that none of his biographers caught the significance or made explanatory references to the tragedy which marked the turning point of the great statesman. Napoleon Bonaparte's creative genius as a military leader was largely an expression of his mastermind alliance with his first wife. Observe with profound significance that tragedy that overtook this man after his head overruled his heart, and he put his first wife aside in furtherance of the ambitions of his head. In your research, as you organise the philosophy of individual achievement, observe carefully, and you will discover that somewhere in the life of all great men will be found the influence of a woman. Observe too that whatever a man and a woman, observe too that wherever a man and a woman pull their emotions in a spirit of harmony for the attainment of a definite end, they become almost invincible against all forms of discouragement and temporary defeat. It is through man's harmonious alliance with woman that he comes into possession of his greatest spiritual power. Perhaps the Creator willed it so, but be that as it may, the fact remains that the world has record of no great man whose lives have not been definitely influenced through the emotions of love and sex. Let it be clearly understood that in speaking of sex, I have reference to that inborn creative emotion which gives man his creative ability, and not merely to the physical expression of that power. It is the wrong use and the burlesque connotations of this great emotion which have sometimes degraded it to the lowest levels. In this respect, man has degraded himself as no animal of the order lower in intelligence than man has done. Hill, from your analysis of the emotion of sex, I get the impression that this emotion may be either man's greatest asset or his greatest liability, according to his understanding and application of the emotion. Carnegie, you are exactly right in your assumption, and now I wish to call your attention to another significant fact. The emotion of sex without the modifying emotion of love, as it is expressed in illicit sex relationships, is man's most dangerous influence. When these two great emotions are expressed jointly, they become a creative power which savours of a spiritual nature. Hill, then I take it from your remarks that the emotion of sex, without the modifying influence of the emotion of love, is purely a biological force that may be disastrous if it is not controlled. Carnegie, you have the idea, but let me tell you something about the method by which this emotion should be controlled. The kids are out of school. You hear them? Okay, we're going to stop the chapter there. I know where we ended up. I know where to carry on from. Okay, guys, let's leave today's study group session now. Okay, take care. Much love. Bye. Hi guys, welcome to the channel of love. Okay, I want to try and get chapter 8 finished this evening and not leave such long gaps. How to Raise Your Own Salary by Napoleon Hill. We have Jasper on the table. Please come up to listen to study time. Okay, here's our marker where we was. Okay, I'm going to carry on from here. Hill, from your analysis of the emotion of sex, I get the impression that this emotion may be either man's greatest asset or his greatest liability, according to his understanding and application of the emotion. Carnegie, you are exactly right in your assumption, and now I wish to call your attention to another significant fact. The emotion of sex, without the modifying emotion of love, as it is expressed in illicit sex relationship, is man's most dangerous influence. When these two great emotions are expressed jointly, they become a creative power which savours of a spiritual nature. Hill, then I take it from your remarks that the emotion of sex, without the modifying influence of the emotion of love, is purely a biological force that may be disastrous if it is not controlled. Carnegie, you have the idea, but let me tell you something about the method by which this emotion should be controlled. The safety valve consists in the principle of transmutation, through which this great driving power may be converted and placed back of one's definite major purpose. When used in this manner, it becomes a priceless asset even without the modifying influence of the emotion of love. The emotion of sex will not be denied some form of expression. As I have stated, it resembles a river in that it can be dammed up and its powers diverted into whatever forms of action one desires, but it cannot be shut off from expression without great damage. Like the water of a river that has been dammed, if it is not released under controlled conditions, it will break out by the sheer force of its own inherent power in ways that are destructive. This is a fact well known to all doctors and psychiatrists. Uncontrolled emotions of love and sex are responsible for most of the mental disorders and many forms of insanity. So you see that self-discipline, through which these powers are guided into safe channels of human endeavour, is the only sensible solution of the problem they present. Hill, inasmuch as the emotions of love and sex appear to have first place in the powers over which one should exercise self-discipline, will you now analyse their influence in the practical affairs of daily life? I wish further enlightenment as to the part these emotions play in the essential factors of human relationship in all walks of life, as far as you can describe them. Carnegie, that is a sensible request, so let us deal with it frankly, keeping in mind that any philosophy of individual achievement which is of practical value must enable people to surmount the practical problems of daily life, and I mean all the problems. As we have already seen, all human activity is based upon motive. It was not by chance that the motives of love and sex were placed at the head of the list of the 9 basic motives. That is precisely where they belong, because these 2 motives inspire more action than any other motives combined. The great literature, poetry, art, drama and music have their roots in the love motive. In Shakespeare's works, you will observe that both the tragedies and the comedies are highly coloured with the motives of love and sex. Remove these motives from the Shakespearean plays, and you would have nothing left but commonplace dialogue, no better than that of an ordinary playwright. You see, therefore, that these creative emotions can serve the highest purpose in literature. The accomplished orator, in whatever field of endeavour he may be engaged, gives colour and magnetic force to his words by transmuting the emotions of love and sex into enthusiasm, and thus does he impart feeling through the spoken word. I have heard orations which were masterpieces in both their theme and their perfect English, yet they failed to impart feeling, because the orator marshalled his thoughts from his head instead of his heart. He put no feeling into his words because he either lacked emotional capacity or was ignorant as to its use. No author ever writes a line in which he does not convey to the reader the exact state of his own mind, whether he writes from his head or his heart, and all the king's horses and all the king's men could not prevent the reader from detecting in his writing the presence of emotion or the lack of it. Perhaps the greatest example of this truth in all literature may be found in the Bible. No one can read a single paragraph from the Bible without catching something of an emotional feeling of its writer, although the actual meaning is sometimes beyond the possibility of accurate interpretation. No 2 people have ever been known to interpret the meaning of most of the contents of the Bible in exactly the same manner, but everyone who reads the Bible recognises the power of the emotional feeling it conveys. In ordinary conversation, everyone imparts, through the spoken word, the exact colouring of his own feelings, or his lack of feelings, and it is by this means that experienced observers of human character arrive at the actual state of mind of the speaker. As we all know, words often are used not to convey one's thoughts, but to conceal them. Therefore, the experienced analyst of human character judges people not by their words, but by the feeling or lack of feeling they unconsciously impart with their words. Jasper's just having a little cleaning session. I just want to... I'm not sure if the microphone's going to pick that up. Okay. Jasper. Would you like to come down? Good boy. Come on. Come down for me. Come on. You need a little push to get along. Thank you. It is by this method that a woman's so-called intuition may, if she will be guided by it, enable her to distinguish the real from the false in man's words of proclaimed affection. When a man speaks from his heart instead of his head, his words carry connotations which no experienced woman will misunderstand, but she relies upon the feeling imparted by the words rather than the words. In view of these well-established truths, consider how important it is for one to understand and to use deliberately the power of emotion in speech and in writing, for it is a truth indeed that no man ever speaks a word or writes a line without consciously or unconsciously betraying the presence of his feelings or the lack of feelings, no matter what the construction of his words may be intended to convey. Hill. If I understand you, Mr. Carnegie, one's words are coloured by the nature of emotions, whether the emotions are positive or negative. Carnegie: that is true, but I wish to call your attention to the fact that the negative emotions, such as fear, jealousy, and anger, can be controlled and transmuted into a constructive driving force. It is through this sort of self-discipline that the negative emotions may be shorn of their dangers and made to serve useful ends. Sometimes fear and anger will inspire actions in which a man would not otherwise engage, but all actions growing out of negative emotions should have the modifying influence of the head, so they may be guided to constructive ends. Hill: should one submit both the negative and the positive emotions to the modifying influence of the reasoning faculty, or the head, as you express it, before expressing the emotions in action? Carnegie: yes, this is one of the major purposes of the reasoning faculty. No one should ever, at any time, act on his emotions without first modifying his impulses of thought by submitting them to his reasoning faculty. This is the major function of self-discipline. As I stated at the beginning, self-discipline consists of a proper balancing of the powers of the head and the heart. The human ego, consisting, as Webster defines it, of the entire man considered as union of soul and body, should be the judge whose influence should be the determining factor as the circumstances and the extent that either the head or the heart should be given the greater influence in forming plans and making decisions. Self-discipline, then, should include a working arrangement through which the ego may throw its weight on the side of either the emotions or the reasoning faculty, in connection with all expressions of either of these. We're at the end. That was a really short chapter. Okay, that surprised me. Okay, we'll end on this little quote then. Time is a relentless master. It forces everything and everyone to gravitate to where it belongs by its nature. Okay, chapter 9. Organise your thinking. But I will leave you today. That was such a short little read. 11 minutes, 46 seconds. Time is a relentless master. It forces everyone and everything. It forces everything and everyone to gravitate to where it belongs by its nature. Okay, guys. Thank you for joining me on this short little session. I did not even realise that there wasn't many pages left. Well, there you have it. A nice short session today. Okay, guys, I will catch up with you soon. And we are on to chapter 9. Okay, until then, take care. Much love. Hi, guys. Welcome to the Channel of Love Study Group. Okay, we're on chapter 11. How to Raise Your Own Salary by Napoleon Hill. So, I don't even know what the chapter is, what it's called. Let's have a look. Okay, seek inspiration, in brackets, applied enthusiasm. Chapter number 11. Okay, we ended on this quote, which says, 2 kinds of people never get ahead. Those who do only that which they are told to do, and those who will not do what they are told to do. 2 kinds of people never get ahead. Those who do only that which they are told to do, and those who will not do what they are told to do. Okay, chapter 11. Seek inspiration, applied enthusiasm. Inspiration, as used here, has reference to that combination of emotions usually known as enthusiasm, but inspired feeling has a deeper meaning because it is related to the spiritual powers of man and has its source in the subconscious mind. Inspiration, the emotion put into action through spiritual power, is the beginning of all great achievements of whatever nature. Everyone desires to achieve personal success in one form or another, but only those who acquire the habit of fanning the fire of enthusiasm into a white heat of obsessional desire ever attain noteworthy success. More than 40 years ago, the stepmother of a young mountaineer called him into the family living room, excluded the other children of the family from the conference, and said something which changed his entire life for the better, and at the same time planted in his mind a desire which has transplanted into thousands of other minds, the desire to become self-determining through the rendering of useful service. This boy was only 11 years of age, but he was known among the mountain folk as the worst boy in the county. This is what his stepmother said to him. People misjudge you. They call you the worst boy in the county, but you are not the worst boy. You are the most active boy, and all you need is a definite purpose to which you can direct the attention of your inquiring mind. You have a keen imagination and plenty of initiative. Therefore, I suggest that you become a writer. If you will do this and give as much interest to reading and writing as you have been devoting to playing pranks on the neighbours, you may live to see the time when your influence will be felt throughout this state. There was something in the stepmother's tone of voice which registered effectively in the bad boy's mind. He caught the spirit of enthusiasm in which his stepmother had spoken to him and began immediately to act on her suggestion. By the time he was 15 years of age, he was writing newspaper and magazine stories that were being published in small newspapers and magazines. His writing was not brilliant, but it carried a spirit of enthusiasm which made it readable. At the age of 18, he was assigned by the editor of Bob Taylor's magazine to write the story of Andrew Carnegie's achievements in industry. That assignment was destined to bring another change in his life, for it led not only to the opportunity to write books that would make his influence felt throughout the state, as his stepmother had suggested, but that influence now extends throughout a major portion of the world, and it is obviously destined to render useful service in helping to save the American way of life from annihilation. In the interview with Andrew Carnegie, this young writer was moved by Mr. Carnegie's enthusiasm. He acquired the spirit of that enthusiasm, and it has been that spirit which has made his books bestsellers for many years. Mr. Carnegie has emphasised the importance of initiative, definiteness of purpose, persistence, and organised endeavour. We come now to the chapter in which an analysis will be made of the power behind all these, the power that gives life and action to these qualities. That power is known as inspiration. Hill. If I am ready, Mr. Carnegie, for your... If I am ready, yes. Let's start again. Okay. Hill. I am ready, Mr. Carnegie, for your analysis of the 11th principle of individual achievement, which you call inspiration. I wish you to define the meaning of this term and describe how one may develop enthusiasm at will. Carnegie. Inspiration can be developed by stimulating the faculty of the emotions through any of the 14 major emotions we have mentioned in previous interviews, or any other emotion. Hill. Then inspiration is emotion in action? Carnegie. That is the brief way of stating it. Perhaps it would be more correctly stated if one said that inspiration is voluntary emotion, a feeling that one initiates at will. But you have overlooked one very important factor in your questions, the question of control of inspiration. It is just as important to know how to modify, control, or shut off entirely the action of the emotions as it is to know how to start them into action. Before we go into the discussion of emotional control, however, let us take inventory of the benefits available through inspiration. To begin with, let us be reminded that inspiration is the result of desire expressed in terms of action and based upon motive. Inspiration is a form of emanation which creates enthusiasm. No normal person ever goes into a heat of enthusiasm without a motive. It is obvious, therefore, that the beginning of all enthusiasm is desire based on motive. There are two types of enthusiasm, passive and active. Perhaps it would be more accurate if I said that enthusiasm may be expressed in two ways: passively, through the stimulation of emotional feeling, and actively, by the expression of feeling through words or deeds. Hill. Which is the more beneficial of the two, the active expression or the passive? Carnegie. The answer to that depends upon the circumstances. Of course, passive enthusiasm always precedes the expression of active enthusiasm, as one must feel it before he can express it in any form of actions or words. There are times when the expression of enthusiasm may be detrimental to one's interest, as it may indicate over-eagerness or disclose one's state of mind under circumstances when he does not wish to have it known to others. It is highly important, then, that one learn how to withhold the expression of his feelings under all circumstances. It is also important that one acquire the ability to give open expression of his feelings at will. In both instances, the control is the important factor. Now let us briefly describe some of the benefits of both passive and active enthusiasm. First of all, let us remember that enthusiasm, which may be an expression of one or more of the emotions, stimulates the vibration of thought and makes it more intense, thus starting the faculty of the imagination to work in connection with the motive which inspired the enthusiasm. Enthusiasm gives tone quality to one's voice and makes it pleasing and impressive. A salesman or public speaker would be ineffective without the ability to turn on his enthusiasm at will. The same is true of one who engages in ordinary conversation. Even the most prosaic subjects can be made interesting if they are expressed with enthusiasm. Without it, the most interesting subjects can become boresome. Enthusiasm inspires initiative, both in thought and in physical action. It is very difficult for one to do well that in which he has no feeling of enthusiasm. Enthusiasm dispels physical fatigue and overcomes laziness. It has been said that there are no lazy men. What appears to be a lazy man is one who is moved by no motive over which he becomes enthusiastic. Enthusiasm stimulates the entire nervous system and causes it to perform its duties more efficiently, including in particular the function of digestion of food. For this reason, the meal hour should be the pleasantest hour of the day, and it should never become the occasion for settling personal or family differences or of opinion, nor should it become the time for the correction of the faults of the children. Enthusiasm stimulates the subconscious section of the brain and puts it to work in connection with the motive which inspires enthusiasm. In fact, there is no known method of stimulating the subconscious mind voluntarily except that of inspired feeling. Here, let us emphasize the fact that the subconscious mind acts upon all feeling, whether it is negative or positive. It will act on the emotion of fear as quickly as it will act on the emotion of love, or it will go to work on the worry over poverty as quickly as it will act on the feeling of opulence. It is important, therefore, to recognise that enthusiasm is the positive expression of feeling. Enthusiasm is contagious. It affects everyone within its range, a fact that is well known to all master salesmen. Moreover, one may influence others through either the active or passive expression of enthusiasm. As passive enthusiasm stimulates one's brain so that it sends out highly intensified thought vibrations that may be picked up by others, enthusiasm discourages all forms of negative thought and dispels fear and worry, thus preparing the mind for the expression of faith. Enthusiasm is the twin brother of the faculty of the will, it being the major source of sustained action of the will. It is also a sustaining force in connection with persistence. We might say, therefore, that willpower, persistence, and enthusiasm are triplets, which give one sustained action with a minimum loss of physical energy. As a matter of fact, enthusiasm converts fatigue and static energy into active energy. Emerson spoke a deeper truth that most people recognise when he said that nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. He must have known that enthusiasm gives quality to every word a man speaks, to every task at which he sets his hands. Hill. I have heard it said that writers unconsciously project their enthusiasm, or the lack of it, in every word they write, so that even the casual reader may interpret the writer's mental attitude as he wrote. Is this a sound theory? Carnegie. Not just a sound theory, but a fact. Try it out yourself and be convinced. A man's writing may be translated into other languages, but it will very largely carry with it the same tempo of enthusiasm the writer felt when writing. I have heard it said that the writer of advertisements who feels no enthusiasm in connection with his copy writes poor copy, no matter how many facts he may describe. I have also heard it said that the lawyer who feels no enthusiasm over his case fails to be convincing to judges and juries. And there is plenty of evidence that the enthusiasm of a doctor is his greatest remedy in the sick room. Enthusiasm is one of the greatest builders of confidence, for everyone knows that enthusiasm and faith are closely related. Enthusiasm denotes hope and courage and belief in oneself. I do not recall ever having prompted a man to a higher position or ever having employed a man for a responsible position who did not first demonstrate his enthusiasm over the possibilities of the position. I have observed that the young people who have gone to work in our offices as clerks and stenographers have promoted themselves into more responsible positions in almost exact ratio to the enthusiasm they displayed in their work. Hill. Is it not possible for one to display too much enthusiasm for his own goal? Carnegie. Yes, uncontrolled enthusiasm often is as detrimental as no enthusiasm. For example, the man who is so enthusiastic over himself and his own ideas that he monopolises the conversation when conversing with others is sure to be unpopular, not to mention the fact that he misses many opportunities to learn by listening to others. Then there is the man who becomes too enthusiastic over the roulette wheel or the horses, and the man who becomes more enthusiastic over ways and means of getting something for nothing than he does over rendering useful service. Not to mention the woman who becomes more enthusiastic over card parties and society than she does over making her home and herself attractive to her husband. This sort of uncontrolled enthusiasm may be very detrimental to all whom it affects. Hill. Is enthusiasm of any value to the man engaged in manual labour? Carnegie. I can best answer that by calling your attention to the fact that most of the higher officials of my organisation began in the humblest of positions. The man who made the greatest progress of all my associates began as a stake driver, and he formerly worked as a teamster. His boundless enthusiasm was the quality that first attracted my attention to him, and it was the same quality that lifted him step by step, into the highest position we had to offer. Yes, enthusiasm can be of value to anyone, regardless of his occupation, for it is the quality that attracts friends, establishes confidence, and breaks down the opposition of others. Hill. What part, if any, does enthusiasm or lack of it play in the relationship of the home? Carnegie. Let us go back a little way and consider the part that enthusiasm plays in bringing men and women together in a bond of marriage. Did you ever hear of a man winning the woman of his choice without displaying considerable enthusiasm over her? And it also works the other way around. A man will not be inclined to propose marriage to the woman who shows no enthusiasm over him. Mutual enthusiasm, therefore, is usually the basis of marriage, and woe unto the party to the marriage who allows that enthusiasm to wane afterward. We speak of the relationship as love, but what is love but mutual enthusiasm of two people over each other? Hill. Under what circumstances does enthusiasm reach its highest degree of personal benefit? Carnegie. In a mastermind alliance, two or more people work together in a spirit of perfect harmony for the attainment of a definite purpose. Here, the enthusiasm of each member of the alliance projects itself into the minds of all the other members, and the sum total of enthusiasm thus created by the harmonious blending of a group of minds becomes available to and influences each individual member. Hill. You mean, for example, where there are, let us say, a dozen men allied in a mastermind group, each man in the alliance has his own enthusiasm supplemented by that of all the others. Therefore, his enthusiasm becomes multiplied by 12. Is that the idea? Carnegie. That is the general idea, but it often happens that the enthusiasm of one or more members of such an alliance is increased much more than the sum total of the entire group. One of the strange effects of a mastermind alliance is the fact that it brings into operation the principle of increasing returns. In connection with the stepping up of the vibrations of the mind, so that one person may feel the effects of enthusiasm to an extent that produces the state of mind known as faith. Theoretically, what happens is this. The influence of the mastermind alliance of minds steps up the rate of thought vibration to where it reaches the level of infinite intelligence on the part of one or more members of the alliance. Under such a condition, I have known men to create ideas that they were not capable of creating alone under the ordinary circumstances of thought, ideas far beyond the range of knowledge of all the members combined. Hill. I can see that enthusiasm is a greatly misunderstood word, judging by what you have just said. Carnegie. It is perhaps the most misunderstood word in the English language, for there are but few who recognise the so-called genius is only a man who, because of his great capacity for enthusiasm, steps up the vibrations of his mind until he is enabled to communicate with a source of knowledge not available to him through the faculty of reason alone. Most so-called enthusiasm is nothing but an uncontrolled expression of one's ego, a state of mental excitement which is easily recognised as nothing but a meaningless expression of personal vanity. That sort of enthusiasm may be very detrimental to those who indulge in it, as they usually express themselves in some form of exaggeration. Hill. Will you give more details concerning your statement that many of your employees have promoted themselves through the expression of enthusiasm? Just what effect did their enthusiasm have on their jobs that entitled them to promotion? Carnegie. It not only had an effect on their own jobs, but it affected those who worked with them. You recall my statement in the effect that a man with a negative mind, working in a plant where he may contact hundreds of other workmen, may influence all of the others to become also negative to a greater or lesser degree. Well, the same principle applies where one has a positive mind and expresses enthusiasm in connection with his work. Any state of mind is contagious. There is a law of nature which tends to make men's thought habits permanent. That same law may also be related to the principle of telepathy, through which thought passes from one brain to another. At any rate, the person with an active mind, whether it be negative or positive, will influence every person within range of that mind so that he acquires a portion of it. Now you can see why an employee with a positive mind is worth more than one with a negative mind. The employee who thinks in terms of enthusiasm naturally is one who is happy in his work. He therefore radiates a wholesome mental attitude that spreads to those around him, and they too take on a part of his attitude. Accordingly, they become more effective workers. But that is not the only reason why the person who expresses enthusiasm as a habit promotes himself into the more desirable positions of life. Enthusiasm, as I have already stated, gives one a keener imagination, increases his intuitive, makes him more alert of mind, gives him a more pleasing personality, and thereby attracts the cooperation of others. These traits of mind make it inevitable that one promotes himself into any position which he may become capable of filling. Every thought one releases becomes a definite part of one's character. This transformation takes place through the principle of auto-suggestion. One does not have to be a mathematician to figure out what will happen to the person whose dominating thoughts are positive, in view of the fact that such a person is adding power to his own character with every thought he releases. Thought by thought, he builds a personality that provides him with a strong will, a keen imagination, self-reliance, persistence, initiative, and the courage and ambition to desire and to acquire whatever he wants. An employer has but little to do with the promotion of such a person. If one employer neglects to recognise his ability, he finds another who will, but he manages to keep growing and advancing in any direction he chooses. Hill, I get the idea, Mr. Carnegie. An employee whose mind is dominated by the spirit of enthusiasm is beneficial to an employer, not only by his influence on other employees, but because of his own acquired strength of personality. Is that what you mean? Carnegie, that's what I mean, and the principle applies to everyone, not merely to an employee. Take the owner of a retail store, for example, and you will find that his mental attitude is definitely reflected in every person who works in the store. I have heard it said that a skilled psychologist can walk through any retail store, study the employees a few minutes, and then give a surprisingly accurate description of the owner, of the dominating head of the store, without ever seeing him or hearing a word spoken from him. Hill, then one might say that a store or a business has its own personality, consisting of the dominating influence of the personnel of the business. Is that true? Carnegie, yes, and it is true of the home or any place where people gather regularly. The psychologist with a keen sense of perception can walk into any home, get the mental feel of the place, and tell precisely whether the home is dominated by the spirit of harmony or the spirit of bickering and friction. The mental attitude of people leaves its permanent influence on the very atmosphere of their environment. Every city, for example, has its own rate of vibration made up of the dominating influences and the mental attitudes of the people who live there. Moreover, Every street and every block in every street has its own personality, each being so different from the others that the trained psychologist can walk down any street blindfolded and pick up enough information from the mental feel of the street to give an accurate description of the people who live there. Hill, that seems almost incredible, Mr. Carnegie. Carnegie, perhaps it may, to the inexperienced person, but not so to the skilled interpreter of people's mental attitude. If you wish convincing evidence of the accuracy of what I have just said, make an experiment of your own. Take a walk down Fifth Avenue in New York City and observe the feeling of opulence you pick up as you go along. Then go across to the tenement section. Take a stroll down that thoroughfare and observe the feeling of defeatism and poverty that you will pick up. The experiment will provide you with undeniable evidence that the vibrations of Fifth Avenue and the vibrations of the tenement street are different opposites, one negative, the other positive. Carry the experiment still further by going into private homes. Choose a home where you know there is domestic harmony and cooperation. Study carefully the mental feel you pick up in this home without anyone speaking a word to you. Then go into the home where you know the domestic relationship is disturbed by inharmony and family friction. Study the mental feel you pick up there. By the time you have made a dozen such experiments, you will know from first-hand experience that every home has a mental atmosphere that harmonises perfectly with the mental attitude of those who live there. This experiment will also convince you that there is some unknown law of nature which fixes the habits of thought and tends to give them permanency. The law not only gives permanency to thought in the mind of the individual, but it extends the influence of that thought to the environment in which one lives. Firework. To end that off. Firework at 1:02 in the afternoon. Well, hey. That was awesome because that comes in with the reading I'm actually uploading at the moment, a collective reading for the channel. So I'm so pleased that I've actually read a whole chapter in one session. Guys, I will catch up with you soon. Do you want to know what the next chapter is called? It's chapter 12. Okay. I believe it's called Control Your Attention. Okay, let's leave with this little quote. It will pay anyone to stand on the sidelines of life and watch himself go by so he may see himself as others see him. It will pay anyone to stand on the sidelines of life and watch himself go by so he may see himself as others see him. Okay, guys, have yourself a fantastic day and I'll catch up with you soon. Take care, much love, bye for now. Hi guys, welcome to the Channel of Love study group. Okay, we are studying How to Raise Your Own Salary by Napoleon Hill. We are on chapter 12, Control Your Attention. Now, we left our last session on this quote. It will pay anyone to stand on the sidelines of life and watch himself go by so he may see himself as others see him. Okay, let's sort the hair. Control your attention. On the book, Lucy, on the book. Hill. Mr. Carnegie, you have named the 12th principle of the philosophy of individual achievement, controlled attention. Will you describe how this principle can be applied in the practical affairs of life? Let's just sort that bit of hair out. Carnegie. Very well. Let us take note, first of all, of the fact that controlled attention is directly related to all the previous 11 principles we have analysed. As a matter of fact, there is a portion of each of these 11 principles combined with the principle of controlled attention. From this, you will observe that the proper approach to mastery of the principle of controlled attention is by mastery and application of the 11 principles previously covered. Now let us define the term controlled attention and make sure we understand exactly what it means. It is the act of combining all the faculties of the mind and concentrating them upon the attainment of a definite purpose. The time involved in the act of concentration of thought on a given subject depends upon the nature of the subject and upon that which one expects in connection with it. Take my own case, for example. The dominating forces of my mind are, and have been for many years, concentrated upon the making and marketing of steel. I have others allied with me who likewise concentrate their dominating thoughts upon the same objective. Thus we have the benefit of controlled attention in collective form, consisting, as it does, of the individual mind power of a great number of people, all working toward the same end in a spirit of harmony. Hill, could you not have carried on other business activities just as successfully as you conducted the steel industry and at the same time? Wouldn't the mastermind principle have made that possible? Carnegie, I have known men to conduct many separate, unrelated businesses successfully with the aid of the mastermind, but I have always believed they would have done much better had they confined their efforts entirely to one line of business. Splitting one's attention has the effort of dividing one's powers. The best plan for anyone to follow is to devote all his energies to one specific field. This concentration enables one to specialise in that field. Hill, but what about doctors who engage in general practice? Do they not have a better opportunity to add to their income than those who specialise in one particular branch of medicine? Carnegie, the exact opposite is true. If you ever had occasion to engage a specialist to remove your appendix, as I have had, you will learn that specialisation in medicine pays. When I was a small boy, the only family physician who used to look after the health of the people of our neighbourhood would have removed an appendix for $25, and I suspect he could have done the job about as well as a specialist, who charged me more than 10 times that amount, but I called in the specialist just the same. Hill, does this same rule apply in the field of retail merchandising? Carnegie, it applies in every line of business and every calling. Modern merchandising has practically made the old-fashioned general store obsolete. While the most prosperous stores are departmentalised, they are not the same as the old general merchandise stores, because each department is managed by a specialist who devotes all his time to that department. You might say that a modern department store is nothing but a group of highly specialist stores, all operating under one roof and one general overhead, but possessing increased buying power that gives the store a tremendous advantage over smaller stores. Hill, you would say then that the department store is managed under the principle of controlled attention. Carnegie, that and other principles of the philosophy of individual achievement, especially the mastermind principle and definiteness of purpose. Hill, what about the banking business? Is it managed also by application of the principle of controlled attention? Carnegie, very much so. Every department of a large bank and practically every individual position in each department is highly specialised. The same is true of railroading. Practically every position in the railroad business is specialised. Promotions are from the bottom upward, and the men holding the most responsible positions have had training in nearly all the subordinate positions, but they never undertake to hold two jobs at the same time. It is the same in the steel industry. Men become highly skilled by confining their efforts to specialised work. Here too, promotions are from the bottom upward. All of our head men have served their apprenticeships in subordinate jobs in the operating end of the business. Hill, you believe then that the better opportunities of the future will be available to those who concentrate their efforts along some specialised lines. Carnegie, it has always been that way, Perhaps it always will be. Hill, what about the profession of teaching? Is it not possible for a teacher to prepare himself to teach many different subjects? Carnegie, it is possible, but not advisable. The big universities are nothing but a group of associated colleges, each specialising in some particular branch of education. If it were practical for a teacher to do better work by devoting his efforts to a diversity of subjects, the universities would have discovered this long ago. Hill, what about the student who is preparing himself for a life work? Should he specialise in some particular branch of education? Carnegie, yes, if he knows what his definite major purpose in life is to be. Otherwise, he should confine his efforts to a general educational course until such time as he chooses a goal. Then he should continue his education through specialised training. The lawyer, for example, usually takes a course in general education, then specialises in law. The doctor usually does likewise. General education gives one an approach to organised thinking, self-discipline and self-reliance, all essential qualities for success in any calling. Hill, what about the stenographer? Should he or she concentrate on one line of work? The stenographer must specialise, obviously, before procuring a position. After that, he may have to engage in general service for a while, but the stenographer, who does not wish to remain in that sort of work, takes stock of his opportunities while engaged in general office work, and sooner or later specialises in some particular department through which he can promote himself to a better position. Many of the more successful business and industrial leaders of our time got their start through stenographic positions, where they had an opportunity to study the methods of their superiors. This is among the finest of all types of office work as far as preparation for executive responsibilities is concerned. The stenographer literally goes to school to highly skilled executives and is paid for doing so. Hill, what about the farmer? Should he specialise also? Carnegie, yes he should, but usually he does not. This is one of the major weaknesses of agriculture. The men who are making the most money from the soil are those who specialise in certain crops such as wheat, rye, barley and trucking. The farmer who raises a little of everything very seldom receives much for anything he raises. Hill, what about the bookkeeper? Should he specialise too? Carnegie, yes, unless he is contented to remain always a bookkeeper, and even then he will make more from his work if he specialises in some particular branch of accounting. The better paid men in this field usually branch out from general bookkeeping to auditing and the installation of accounting systems. A clever man in this field finds it quite profitable, for every business beyond the one-man size needs dependable records of its transactions. Hill, now am I going to give you a hard one? Okay, Hill, I am going to give you a hard one, Mr. Carnegie. What about the young woman who intends to marry? What chance has she of specialising, unless it is in connection with pots and pans and the rearing of babies? Carnegie, that's not as hard as you can imagine. Of all the people who should specialise for a life work, I can think of no one who might do so to better advantage than the woman who intends to make marriage a career. Sure, she should specialise. She should specialise first in the psychology of managing a husband by learning how to inspire a man to do his very best. After that, she should specialise in household economy, so she may contribute her part in managing the home. She should specialise also in dietetics, so she will know how to feed a family the sort of food that aids in the maintenance of a sound health. Hill, but Mr. Carnegie, this looks like a lot of specialising. Wouldn't that make a housewife a sort of maid of all work? Carnegie, it need not. It all comes under the heading of preparation for the career of marriage, the greatest of all careers. The woman who completes a college course can plan her education so she can learn how to manage a home, and if she intends to marry, that is precisely what she should do. If she wishes to become a career woman, of course she should plan her education accordingly. Hill. So there seems to be no way out of the responsibility of concentrating one's effort if one is to succeed. Carnegie. No, the jack of all trades usually is good at none. There is some part that everyone can take in the scheme of affairs, some part through which he can render useful service and gain his just compensation. It is everyone's responsibility to find out what his part is and to prepare himself for it. A well-ordered life requires preparation. Before one begins to prepare, he should know for what he is preparing himself. That within itself is concentration of effort. The man who has no definite purpose in life, who cannot do some one thing and do it well, is like a dry leaf on the bosom of the wind. He will be tossed here and there, wherever the winds of chance carry him, but like the rolling stone, he will gather no moss. Unfortunately, the majority of people spend their lives in thus rolling. Hill. Do you mean that a man should choose his definite major purpose before beginning his education and prepare himself to specialise in connection with that aim? Carnegie. Not always. Seldom is a very youthful person who has not finished his basic education in a position to adopt who he has not... Okay, sorry, I'm going to reread that part. Not always. Seldom is a very youthful person who has not finished his basic education in a position to adopt a definite major purpose. In that case, he should complete his essential education through the grades and high school. If he still is unable to choose a major purpose in life, he should either go to work and learn from experience of the possibilities of different occupations, or go to college and take a general liberal arts educational course. After that, one should be able to decide what calling he wishes to follow. Hill. Suppose that a person chooses a definite major purpose, but finds, after he pursues it for a while, that he dislikes it, or he finds something he likes better. Should he make a change? Carnegie. By all means. A man will succeed best in that which he likes best, all else being equal. It is advisable for one to change, provided he does not get into the habit of changing every time the work he has chosen becomes difficult, or he meets with temporary defeat. Changing from one line of work to another involves a tremendous loss. It is something like an industrial plant, the management of which changes from one product to another. The successful person must reach the stage of specialisation sooner or later, the sooner the better. Hill. Is it advisable for a businessman to engage in politics? Carnegie. Not if he wishes to succeed in business. Politics is a profession unto itself, and not a very dependable one at that. But it is a profession, and those who succeed best at it are those who do nothing else. Hill. What sort of career would you advise a young man to choose? A professional career or a business career? Carnegie. That depends upon the young man, his likes and dislikes, his native ability, his physical conditions, etc. Generally speaking, I would say that business and industry offer much broader opportunities than do the professions, because the professions are overcrowded already. This is essentially an industrial nation. Industry is the backbone of our economic structure. I have never seen the time when a reliable, loyal and capable man could not find his place in industry. He is where most of the larger fortunes are made, which, within themselves, partly answers your question, since most people choose a career with the object of earning a living and accumulating as much wealth as possible. There always has been a shortage of capable men at the head of industry, but never a shortage in the professions. Hill. What about the army or the navy or the government service as a career? Are these desirable opportunities in any of these three branches of service? Are there desirable opportunities in any of these three branches of service? Carnegie. Again, I must say that this depends very largely on the person who is choosing the career. If a man wishes an opportunity to engage in a creative effort, he would not choose government service as a career, since his chances there would become a matter of the whims of politicians. He would fare better in either the army or the navy, since these are somewhat further removed from political influence. Some have made commendable records in both of these fields of the service, but generally they were men who liked that sort of life. The line of promotion in both the army and the navy is rather long and by no means easy. Military service calls for concentrated effort and a definite limitation of ambition, as the possibilities of advancement are known in advance. Some men are not suited by nature to limit themselves in this manner. They prefer to take their chances in business or industry, where the risks may be greater and the work harder, but the possibilities of achievement are without any fixed limits. Hill. Would you recommend that an ambitious woman undertake to divide her attention between marriage and a personal career? Carnegie. No, under no circumstances. Career women seldom make successful wives. Conversely, successful wives seldom make efficient career women. It should be one or the other. I have known of many marriages resulting in failure because of this very situation, where the wife endeavoured to divide her attention between her home and a career. It may happen, and it sometimes does, that a married woman is forced to take up a career because of the illness of her husband or his death, but the division of attention between home and career should never be a matter of choice. Hill. Then you recommend concentration of effort through specialisation in all callings? You believe obviously in a one-track mind. Carnegie. Specialisation through concentration of effort gives one greater power. It saves lost motion in both thought and physical action. It harmonises with the principle of definiteness of purpose, the starting point of all achievement. I believe in a one-track mind, if you allow me to describe it in this way. A wide range of knowledge based on facts related to one's major purpose, but expressed through organised plans for the attainment of that purpose. I might make any meaning better understood if I stated it this way. A man should have a multiple-track mind for the accumulation of knowledge, but a single-track mind for the expression of that knowledge, which is about the same as saying that one should have a reserve of both general and specific knowledge, but he should concentrate its use upon the attainment of a definite major purpose. We have already discussed the fact that knowledge gives one no power until it is organised and expressed in action. That requires concentration of effort. A man may be a walking encyclopedia of general knowledge, and I have known such people, but his knowledge will be practically useless until he organises it and gives it some form of expression through definiteness of purpose. Hill. I see what you mean. Definiteness of purpose implies concentration of effort. When a man decides to attain any definite end, he must of necessity concentrate his thoughts and his physical action upon that purpose. Carnegie. That's the idea. You see, therefore, that the person who has mastered and begun to apply the 11 principles of this philosophy previously discussed has begun, at least, to acquire the habit of controlled attention. I call your attention to the fact that the principles of this philosophy are so interrelated that the mastery and application of any one principle leads to the application of combinations of the other principles. Hill. You mean, for example, that when one adopts a definite major purpose as his life work and begins to carry out that purpose, he automatically begins also to make use of controlled attention, self-discipline, organised individual endeavour, organised thought and self-reliance as a very minimum. He may, of course, be under the necessity of using many of the other principles depending upon the nature of his purpose. Carnegie. That's exactly what I mean. You see, therefore, how impossible it would be for one to single out a definite major purpose and begin carrying out his plans for attaining it without concentrating his attention on that purpose. Carry the analysis a step further and imagine, if you can, anyone mastering and applying the 11 previously mentioned principles of this philosophy without the aid of controlled attention. This principle is an indispensable part of the philosophy of individual achievement. If I had overlooked including it as one of the 17 principles, it would have projected itself into the philosophy wherever one began to apply the philosophy. Thus, you may acquire an understanding of the importance of controlled attention. Without its application, success in the broader sense is an impossibility. And that's the end of chapter 12. Okay, let's leave with this quote. A rudderless ship and a purposeless man are eventually stranded on a desert sand. Wow. Chapter 13, apply the golden rule. Okay, I will catch up with you guys soon. Take care. Much love. Hi guys, welcome to the channel of Love Study Group. Okay, we are studying How to Raise Your Own Salary by Dr. Napoleon Hill. We are on chapter 15, Budget Your Time and Money. Andrew Carnegie directed his entire life by a strict budget that covered both his time and his financial resources. His achievements qualified him to speak as an authority on this subject, for America has never produced a man who made better use of his opportunities under the American way of life than he did. Economic and social conditions have changed greatly since Mr. Carnegie's day, but the principles of personal achievement have not changed. They are the same today as they were when he was working his way up from the bottom to an enviable position, and they will serve as effectively today as they did when he was building his career. Hill. Mr. Carnegie, you have named the budgeting of time as one of the essentials for individual achievement. Will you indicate what methods one should adopt to make the best use of his time? Carnegie. Every successful person plans his life as carefully as a successful businessman plans his business. He begins by adopting a definite major purpose, and he follows through by devoting a definite proportion of his time to attaining the object of that purpose. Hill. What proportion of one's time should be devoted to the attainment of his major purpose? Carnegie. To begin with, let us recognise that the average person comes into the world with nothing but time as an asset. Each person has 24 hours of time each day, no more, no less. When a person reaches the age of personal responsibility, he should divide his time into 3 periods. 1 for sleep, 2, 1 for work, and 3, 1 for recreation. The usual distribution of this 24 hours per day period is 1, 8 hours for sleep, 2, 8 hours for work, and 3, 8 hours for recreation. Some people, perhaps a majority of them, find it necessary to work 10 hours per day in order to maintain the present standard of living, while they devote but 6 hours per day to recreation. The average person cannot get along on less than 8 hours of sleep. Hill. Which of these 3 periods of the day do you consider to be the most important? Carnegie. That depends altogether on what you consider to be important. Sound health demands at least 8 hours of sleep. An average living under our present standard of living demands at least 8 to 10 hours a day for work. This leaves from 6 to 8 hours a day of free time, which one may use as he pleases, and I would say that it is the most important period of the day as far as personal achievement is concerned, because it provides one with an opportunity to acquire additional education, plan new means of rendering service, and create goodwill. Hill. What about the person who uses this period for none of these purposes, but devotes it entirely to personal pleasure, which in no way brings him additional influence or friends? Carnegie. That person who uses his free time in this manner will never be a success in anything, except by some rare stroke of good fortune which favours him without his own efforts. The sleep period produces no results except that of maintaining sound health. Therefore, one can take no liberties with it, and it holds no seed of opportunity for self-promotion or for the accumulation of material things. The work period requires all of one's thoughts and efforts for specific duties. Therefore, it holds but slight opportunities for extra effort, although one may so use it as to lay the foundation for opportunities by modifying the quality and the quantity of the work he performs. The free time period is just what its name implies, time that one may use as he pleases. Therefore, it is properly called one's opportunity time. During this period, one may not only plant the seed of opportunity, but one may also cause the seed to germinate and grow by carefully regulating his association with others and by exercising strict discipline over his own thoughts. The more successful people combine their free time with their work time by devoting all of it to some sort of action which aids them in attaining the object of their major purpose. Thus, they work about 2/3 of their time and sleep the other third. Hill. But isn't it necessary for a man to take time off for recreation and play if he is to maintain sound health? Carnegie. Yes, sound health demands a change of physical and mental habits, but successful people have learned how to make these changes by so arranging their work time and their free time that the free time provides recreation along lines that contribute to and harmonise with the duties they perform during their work time. Hill. I see what you mean. A man may so use his free time that it brings him opportunities definitely related to his work, such as association with people who can be of benefit to him in connection with the attainment of his major purpose, although his relationship with them may be entirely of a social nature from which he gets his recreation. Carnegie. That's the idea precisely. But you should recognise the fact that most people do not spend their free time in this manner. They use it for excitement, which too often they mistake for pleasure, and for association with people who influence them by destructive habits, such as drinking and gambling, or people who influence them by just plain laziness. While one's free time may be properly called opportunity time, it usually proves to be one's misfortune time, for it is during this period that most people acquire negative habits which vitally affect their work time. Such habits, for example, as cutting into their sleep time and thereby reducing the efficiency of their work time, as well as impairing their physical health. Hill. I see the logic of your argument, Mr. Carnegie, but is it not true that a well-rounded life calls for play and recreation? That old saying that all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy seems to be sound. Carnegie. That may be a sound saying, but there are many misconceptions. Speaking for myself and from my observations of the successful people I have known, I can say that there is no better form of play than that which is associated with the planning and attaining of one's major purpose. It would be a mistake to say that I work hard, for the truth is that I look upon my work as the finest sort of play. So does every other man who is succeeding in the true sense of that term. A man's work can be a recreation if he does it in a spirit of intense enthusiasm and likes what he is doing. Enthusiasm recreates and interest in one's work may therefore be recreation. Hill, I recognise the truth of what you have stated, but what sort of man who does not like his work, like the man who is forced to labour in order to have the bare necessities of life, what motive has he for enthusiasm over his work? Carnegie, I thought you would get around to that question. It is the very question I needed in order to make clear to you the full benefits of that free time period. Okay, I want to go back and reread that question. I recognise the truth of what you have stated, but what of the man who does not like his work? The man who is forced to labour in order to have the bare necessities of life. What motive has he for enthusiasm over his work? Carnegie, I thought you would get around to that question. It is the very question I needed in order to make clear to you the full benefit of that free time period. It is true that a man may not always become enthusiastic over the work which yields him nothing but a bare living, but the more he dislikes his work, the more reason he has to take the necessary steps to get out of it into something he likes better. In most cases, his only hope lies in the possibilities of his free time, when he may prepare himself for the sort of work he does like, and form alliances with others who can and will aid him in getting into that sort of work. If he wastes his free time in riotous living or idleness, or in association with people who lead him into negative habits, obviously he must remain in the sort of work he does not like. I didn't like the work I was forced to do during my youth. It was hard, and it paid only enough for a bare living of the plainest sort. I got out of that sort of work by using my free time to prepare myself for something better. The preparation consisted of reading, going to school, and especially the formation of friends among a class of people who could be of use to me. It was these very friends, whom I first contacted during my free time, that came to my aid later in life when I needed working capital to enter the steel business. You see now why I call free time opportunity time? In a strict sense, one should have no such thing as free time, for all of one's time, outside of that required for sleep, should be so used as to bring one some form of benefit. I can truthfully say that I never, in my entire life, spent a second of time voluntarily with anyone whom I did not believe could and would be of benefit to me. Of course, I made the most of my associates, not merely by using them for my own benefit, but by carefully cultivating them and serving them. Hill, but Mr. Carnegie, wouldn't some people consider it selfish for one to cultivate only those whom he desired to use? Carnegie, no matter how one may view this habit, it is an essential for personal achievement. Personally, I see nothing selfish about it, provided one so relates himself to others that he gives as well as receives. And I have made it clear that I have always followed this practice. I can truthfully say for every benefit I have ever received from another person, I have rendered that person an equivalent benefit or more. And for every dollar I have accumulated, I have helped others, many others, to accumulate. So where has the selfishness on my part come in? And to top off my career, I am now engaged in giving all my wealth to other people in ways I think best suited to aid them. Hill, I am glad I asked that question, for it is one that many another person will ask without an opportunity to get the correct answer had I not asked it. From what you have said, I have reached the conclusion that the question of the value of time boils itself down to where one is forced to recognise that the most important portion of one's time is his free time, because the other periods of the day must, of necessity, remain routine periods during which one may not always have control over them. Carnegie, you now have the viewpoint I wished you to get. Free time is exactly what its name implies, for it is the starting point of all individual freedom, of both body and mind. There is but one thing over which anyone has greater control than he has over his free time, and that is the nature of his thoughts. And strangely enough, one's free time is the most favourable of all times for one to organise and direct his thoughts along the lines of his own choice. It provides one with an opportunity to withdraw his thoughts from the pressing obligations of life and direct them to the source of that secret power from within which holds the answer to all human problems. Here then is the greatest of all reasons why one should organise his free time and make deliberate, constructive use of it instead of wasting it in association with idlers and those who lack ambition. And I conceive it to be true that the man who organises and guards his free time by a careful choice of associates, far from being a selfish person, thereby demonstrates the utmost of unselfishness, for only in this way can a man become the greatest benefit to himself and to others. If you wish to find the really selfish man, you may find him wasting his time that may belong to his family or his creditors, in association with idlers who unwisely believe they are having a good time. You will find the selfish man in the saloons and the gambling dens, or in worse places, in company with those who believe that free time is something a man has a right to waste. Look around, observe people carefully, and the truth of what I have said will become obvious. Selfish men are those who live only for self, and usually they prefer to live their lives in company with others who, likewise, believe in living only for self. I hope I have set you right on this subject, for there is such misunderstanding as to what constitutes selfishness. Unselfishness manifests itself by the respect for and the constructive use of time. Selfishness manifests itself by a wanton disregard of time, one's own and the time of others. No man has the right to live unto himself alone. Civilization places on every man a responsibility to others in one form or another. But too many men wish to benefit by the advantages of civilization without contributing anything to the source of these advantages. That is selfishness in its most malignant form, or I have totally misinterpreted the meaning of the word selfishness. My emphasis of this subject is not intended as a rebuke to you for asking the question that prompted it, but it is intended to inspire thought on the part of those who will need straight thinking on this subject, of whom there are millions. Selfishness is one of the fundamental evils of the world, and its true nature needs analysis, such as I hope I have given it. Hill, granted that a man makes efficient use of his work time by relating it to his free time, and so combines the two periods, that he is able to procure whatever he desires, that he has a definite major purpose, and, by the efficient use of his time, attains that purpose, or is well on the way towards its attainment. Is that enough to ensure his success, Mr. Carnegie? Carnegie, no. Assuming that you have reference to material things, money or its equivalent, when you speak of success, let me call your attention to the fact that neither the ability to procure money easily, nor the actual temporary possession of it, will mean much to the man who does not learn how to use riches. The value of all riches, money included, consists in the use one makes of them, not in their mere possession. The successful man, the one who attains economic success, budgets the use of his money and material assets as carefully as he budgets his time. He sets aside a definite amount of his income, usually determined on a definite percentage of the total, for 1. Food, clothing, and household expense. 2. Life insurance. 3. Savings, which he puts to work in some form of investments. 4. Charity and recreation. All 4 of these items are controlled by a strict budget from which no deviation is made except in the rarest cases of emergency. This ensures the saving of a definite percentage of one's income and leads to economic security. What difference would it make whether a man's income were $100 a month or $1,000 a month if he allowed it all to go for living expenses or spent it for recreation or for any other purpose that did not yield a material return of some sort? I must tell you, however, that the majority of the American people make this very mistake. No matter how much they earn, it all goes out, in one way or another, because they have no established budget system for saving and properly using a percentage of it. I have known men to receive salary increases which they promptly spent every cent of it on living expenses. Now, if a man is getting $100 a month and he receives an increase of $25 a month, under ordinary circumstances, he would save the entire amount of his increase, because if he could get along on $100 a month before the increase, he could get along on the same amount afterward, just as well. Economic security is attained by careful management of one's income, and it calls for strict self-discipline in the matter of spending. The trouble with most Americans is that they have acquired the spending habit during their childhood because of the lack of proper self-discipline on the part of their parents, and this habit has become a sort of mania with them. The habit of saving carries with it just as great a thrill as does the habit of spending, once it has been developed through self-discipline. And need I mention that it is a much more desirable habit. Hill, when you speak of saving, you do not mean the mere hoarding of money in a savings account or a safety deposit box, do you, Mr. Carnegie? Carnegie, no, I don't mean that. Intelligent saving calls for the use of one's savings. Money should be put to work earning more money, and if it is not put to use, one might as well not have any more than enough for actual living expenses. Hill, what percentage of a man's income should be set aside as a savings fund? Carnegie, that depends upon many things. The percentage should vary according to whether a man was married or single, and depending upon the number of people dependent upon him for a living or an education. A single man should have a much larger percentage of his income than a married man, since generally speaking, he has fewer dependents. He should save in anticipation of the day when he will have a family, as well as to provide himself with economic security in old age. But every man should save a definite percentage of his gross income, even if it is no more than 5%, in order that he may develop the habit of saving. The amount actually saved is not as important as the habit itself, because the savings habit connotes self-discipline. This is of great value in other directions. Without self-discipline, no man can be sure of ever attaining economic security or of becoming successful in the attainment of his major purpose, no matter how much ability he may have or what his opportunities may be. The habit of saving is self-discipline of a high order. Hill, what do you consider to be the most important item on a man's savings plan? Carnegie, life insurance. That should take precedence over everything else. Whether a man is married or single,
In the first place, life insurance forces one to adopt the savings habit because the premiums have to be paid annually. And this is a form of savings which one cannot draw out and spend as easy as if it were placed in a savings bank. It is also a great builder of self-reliance, and it provides one with peace of mind and freedom from worry over what may happen to his dependents if he dies or to himself in old age. That's the end of chapter 15. Okay, let's end on this quote. Silence has one major advantage. It gives no one a clue as to what your next move will be. Okay, chapter 16, make health a habit. We shall read that chapter in our next session. Okay, guys, have yourself a fantastic day. Take care, much love. Bye.